Are you with me? Thank you. Because now it's going to be really tough. The topic of my next speech is, it can happen to any one of us. Really? Do you know what I mean? Let me go back in time with you. Long, long time ago, there was a king. He ruled over the country of Israel. His name was? Exactly, David. David, yes. And on one day, late afternoon, he came out from his bed and he was looking. He was looking around. And he saw the beautiful lady, the wife of the neighbor, just taking a bath in the garden. She had a pool there. And just by accident, she was naked. And you know, the rest is history. You know the story. It can happen to any one of us, doesn't it? It's a common story. We heard it in many, many variations. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, "She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite." Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Now she was purifying herself from the monthly uncleanness. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David saying, "I am pregnant." It's a common story. It can happen to any one of us, just by accident, doesn't it? But here I highlighted some words in the story that tell me another side of this story. The story is packed full with words that show us intentional actions. He walked around, he got up, he saw, he sent, he find out, he sends again, he sleeps with her. She sent somebody. They were very active there. They were not just passive victims of something that is not under their control. They are in control during the whole time. Can it happen to any one of us? Is it that simple? Are we just victims of bad fortune, bad circumstances? No. It is result of something that they wanted to do. So let us talk a little bit about infidelity. What is infidelity? How can we define infidelity? Do you know the TV show Dr. Oz? Yes, you have it here. I was invited to the Hungarian version of Dr. Oz, and it was very difficult for me because they invited also 7 people from the street, and Dr. Oz asked them to define what is infidelity for them. First he asked the lady, and she reported, we all know how men are, don't we? So if my husband has an affair with another woman, it doesn't bother me. I just don't want him to have emotions to that lady. But every now and then, a sexual encounter, that's okay. But no emotions. That would be infidelity. Then he came to a second lady, and she said, if my husband is dating another woman, that's okay, but he shouldn't go to bed with her. That's not okay, that's infidelity. Then he came to a man and said, I think as men, we should date other women, that's okay, but my wife shouldn't date other men. That's not okay. That's infidelity. I felt more and more uncomfortable, and then he came to me. So let us see what the professional says to the question. I felt so unpopular. because I have a different mindset to the question. And this occasion forced me to formulate my own definition about infidelity. For me, infidelity is a state in which a person living in a declared relationship gets emotionally and or physically involved with a third person for a short or long term, once or several times. I try to cover everything. But I have a more simple version as well. If a man and a woman meet and get married, they create a new form of life that we call we. The we-ness. And this we-ness of the couple has its own boundaries. And every act by which you cross these boundaries, by going out of the we-ness and sharing something that belongs only to the two of you with somebody outside this circle, or inviting somebody inside the circle who has nothing to do there, is infidelity. Because the effects are just the same. I have a scientific test which will measure if you are in danger. So please be very careful. 5 very simple questions, and I want you to answer with total honesty. And please count the yeses that you say. Question number 1. Do you work together with people of the opposite sex? No, never. Question number 2. Do you travel together with people of the opposite sex? Number 3. Are you a member of any group in which you meet people of the opposite sex without the presence of your spouse? Sports, choir, church. Number 4. Do you have access to a phone or to internet? Number 5. Do you sometimes see members of the opposite sex? Listen carefully, now comes the evaluation. If you have at least one yes, the danger is realistic that someday you will cross a border that you should never cross. The danger is realistic. And so our measures against this danger should be realistic as well. What can we do? Is it possible to prevent infidelity? Let us explore this phenomena a bit more in detail. Suffering infidelity in marriage creates such a deep trauma as surviving a war. The symptoms are just the same. Every time when I speak with couples who have suffered infidelity, I ask the person who gets cheated on, how does it feel? And if you would compare this life event with other life events, negative life events that you suffered, on which place is this? Would you like to hear some stories? Which comparisons they said to me? One lady said, as I was 16, I was raped by my uncle during a family Christmas party in the basement. 10 years later, my husband cheated on me. What my uncle didn't hurt that much, like what my husband did. Terrible. Another lady said, if I had to list up all the negative life events that I went through, being cheated by my husband is on number 2. I said, what is number 1? Standing at the grave of my son. Being cheated comes just after it. Whoa, terrible. A man just called me recently. He said, Gabor, I read your book about infidelity, and I read this example that you wrote there about the lady who said that infidelity is nearly as tragic as losing a child. I lost 2 children, but what my wife does now with me hurts me even more. Can you imagine the pain that people go through who are getting cheated? Is unimaginable. It's just the same. It's PTSD, post-traumatic stress disease, just like Rambo in the movie. They have flashbacks. They see the whole world with different eyes, watching where the danger comes from. It's always an alert situation for them, because they can never relax, because they lost their basic trust towards the other person. It is a deep trauma. In fact, it is one of the deepest traumas that an adult person can experience. How often does it happen? In my practice, 7 out of 10 couples who come for counseling have infidelity issues. Couples who experience extramarital relationships go through very similar stations. I was listening to more than 130 stories from the couch on the other side connected to infidelity, and every time it was just like an echo. I hear the same again and again. The details are different, but the big things are just the same. They're going through the same stations. So this brought to my mind that infidelity is a process that is explainable and understandable. And if something is explainable, that is also predictable. If you see somebody doing certain things, you can predict if this person will get involved in infidelity or not. But if something is predictable, it also becomes preventable. If there are signs, then you can prevent it from happening. There are things that you can do to prevent infidelity. I asked 2 of the world-leading researchers in this area. One of them is Dr. John Gottman, and I'm not sure if you will hear it, because I made the interview during a conference and there was a big crowd, but I have subtitled it. I hope you can see his answers.
We don't know, but we do know what couples do to create loyalty, commitment, and trust. And so those things can be potentially preventative. So we haven't done the preventative research yet to know that they actually work. But we do know that couples build trust by a process we call attunement, where they really are listening to each other in everyday, calm conversations where they're basically saying, how are you doing? You know, what's on your mind, what's on your heart? And they're listening non-defensively and tuning. And that builds trust that rather than dismissing the negative emotions, really accepting them and listening in a very special way. So we can teach people how to do this attunement. And we can help people build loyalty and commitment, because we know that what happens when people build betrayal is they do negative comparisons of their partner to real or imagined alternative relationships. As opposed to cherishing what they have, they wind up nurturing resentment for what's missing instead of nurturing gratitude for what they have with this person. So those processes potentially can affair-proof a marriage, but we don't know for sure because we haven't done the preventative research to show that it actually works. But that's what couples do. They build loyalty, they build commitment, and they build trust in the relationship and don't have affairs.
Really like that expression. You can affair-proof your marriage. That's a big sentence. Listen to the other short interview with Dr. Gary Chapman, who invented the 5 love languages. Maybe you have heard about that. Is it impossible to prevent infidelity?
When you observe a person's behavior, is it possible to predict whether this person will get involved in an affair or not based on his or her behavior?
I think the one thing we do know, if a person has had multiple sexual partners before marriage, they're far more likely to have multiple sexual partners after marriage.
After marriage, okay.
That lifestyle becomes addictive, just as addictive as taking drugs. So they've established a pattern of sexual response, and they tend to do that after marriage. Now, I think if that's not there, if that's not the case, in terms of can we predict whether a particular person will have an affair or not, I think that's very difficult to do because we don't know what's going on in the mind of the person. And we don't know their religious beliefs, we don't know their moral beliefs. If a person has a deep moral conviction that that is wrong, infidelity is wrong, then they're less likely to become involved in it. So I think their belief system becomes extremely important.
Yes. You mentioned that it is possible to heal a relationship after infidelity has happened, but is it possible to do something before that? Is it possible to prevent infidelity?
I think there are things that we can do that make that less likely. One of them is that we keep emotional love alive in the relationship. Because we get married and we have these euphoric feelings for each other, but that only lasts about 2 years. We've researched it. Some a little longer, some a little less. Average 2 years, we come down off the high. And if we don't learn what makes our spouse feel loved, and we choose to speak love in their language, if we don't do that, the love tank gets empty. And we're more likely to get involved with someone else if we go for a long time feeling like they don't love me.
So you say that we are practically putting our spouses at risk if we are not responding to their love needs.
We are. And that's why my book, The 5 Love Languages, has been so helpful, I think. It's helped couples learn how to speak each other's language, keep emotional love alive in the relationship. And when you feel loved by your spouse, life is beautiful.
Life is beautiful, yes.
And when you don't feel loved, it gets to be dark. And you're far more tempted to look somewhere else. So keeping love alive is exceedingly important. I think a second thing is we have to learn how to apologize when we do wrong. And all of us do wrong from time to time.
Yes.
We hurt the person we love the most. But if we're willing to acknowledge that and say, honey, I'm sorry I lost my temper with you and I yelled at you. That was not kind. I hope you can forgive me. If we're willing to apologize and they are willing to forgive, then the barrier is removed. But if we don't apologize, the barrier, an emotional barrier, sits between us. And then there's another altercation, and then another block is put in the wall, and before long we have this wall between us.
It's built up already and separates us.
And that's when we're more likely to look somewhere else. So let's keep the wall torn down by learning to apologize and learning to forgive each other.
So, make them feel that life is beautiful. This is an important step to prevent infidelity from happening. So we saw that infidelity is something that is explainable. If it is explainable, it becomes predictable. And if it is predictable, it becomes preventable as well. Something went wrong here. I wrote a book with many examples, which is called No More Games, where I describe 7 steps how you can prevent infidelity. I would like to show you the 3 most important steps now that you can instantly do to make your marriage affair-proof. Step number 1, define your relationship, which means who are you for each other? There was that nice couple in their early 50s, and as I was listening to their story, I had a quite mixed feeling. In one sentence, they expressed so deep connectedness to each other, I thought that they were born together and they spent their whole life together. In the next sentence, I had the feeling that they just met on the street before they came into my office. So suddenly I asked them, stop for a moment. Tell me please, who are you to each other? Who are you guys? It became very silent in the room. She looked at him with that very strange face expression. You are the man, do something. He looked back at her. Well, it's relationship. It's a women's thing. You do something. And they were playing ping pong with each other with their eyes. And suddenly he starts to clear his throat and I don't know how really to put it in words. You know, we live in an undefined relationship. And I think this was the best definition he could give. They live in an undefined relationship. What is the definition of your relationship? Who are you to each other? What did you agree on? What can you expect from each other? What are the rules of the games that you are playing with each other? Who are you to each other? Let me get back very early into my own marriage. We were married for 2 months, only 2 months. And I was searching for something in my purse, and in a hidden compartment of my purse, I found a condom. A condom that I have put in there many, many years ago. You know, I had these sexual education classes at school. The big message was, always have a condom at hand. You can never know. I was an obedient student. I did it. But now imagine me standing there, married for 2 months, with a condom between my fingers, and the dilemma in my mind. What should I do with this condom? Should I put it back? Should I throw it out? It was one of the big questions of my life. If I put it back, I admit that I am not in control. It can happen to any one of us. You can never know when you enter into a situation when you need it, don't you? But if I put it out, then I admit that being married means to me that I will have no intimate relationship for my whole life with any other woman than my wife. I was totally scared to speak this sentence out loudly. I was so young, so inexperienced. I just knew that it's just not right to put it back. So I took it out. But it got stuck in my mind. I started to formulate this sentence, not aloud, only in my mind. I am married. And it means that from now on, until the end of my life, I am not going to sleep with any other woman than my wife. And by repeating this sentence over and over again in my mind, I suddenly became proud of my marriage. It gave me strength. It gave me something to hold on to. And then I gathered all my courage. I went in front of the mirror and I spoke it out loudly. First time in my life. It felt so good. It felt so good. I challenged you yesterday already to read with me this sentence, I have power over the trajectory of my relationship. I have a second challenge now. Would you read this sentence with me together? Of course, in the version that fits to your gender. I am married. And it means that from now on until the end of my life, I am not going to sleep with any other than my You are great. Wow. You are really great. Do you feel the same that I felt there? it gives you a new perspective about marriage. So, who are you to each other? What is the definition of your relationship? Define your relationship is step number 1. Step number 2 is mark and protect the boundaries. Do you remember what I said earlier about the two creating a new form of life? Something new gets created here, which we call we. And this we, this new form of life, has very definite boundaries around it. Protect your boundaries. Do something to protect your boundaries. It's all about the radar. If you are single, your radar is calibrated to a wide spectrum. You catch in all the signals of the opposite sex. You see somebody and beep, 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 beep. It gives all the signals. Then finally, you meet somebody who is of very special interest to you. You meet somebody who you fall in love with. And something dramatic is happening now. You narrow the perception of your radar to the signals of that person only. Because otherwise you will never find out if he or she is the right one for you. But how about all the other women on the planet? I mean, there are 4 billion of them, and all of them are so beautiful. Wow! Should I say no to all of them? Whew. It feels so bad. How about all the others? Maybe I have even a list in my mind. A list of names, of faces that could be of interest for me. You know what? In that moment, you put all these names, all these lists into brackets. And you take them from the active part of your memory to the passive part of your memory. Because you focus your full attention to that one person. And that person only. And then you realize, yes, she's the one. Yes. And you do it. You know, taking out the little box of the pocket. Would you marry me? Of course, yes. She says yes. And then you do the next step. You remember those names you have put into brackets. From the active part of your memory to the passive part of your memory. Now you do something dramatic. You know that button on your laptop which says delete. You push that button. Delete. And you narrow your perception of your radar only to that person for your whole life. You don't want to get the signals of other persons anymore. Because you narrowed the perception of your radar. You understand what I'm saying? How does that work? I have a quotation from a Hungarian researcher who says, "What is the goal of a marriage? The expressed commitment which marks the end of a life stage of searching for a partner, which is witnessed by those we are in the closest relationship with. These rights have a definite role in the organization of human society. It is not by accident that someone becomes a doctor when their degree is handed over to them. When young people reject the right of marriage, they are in fact protesting against accepting their identity, which is formed by the finality of choosing a partner." So there are 2 life stages. Till this moment, I was in the searching phase. I was searching. Beep, 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 beep. But now, I entered into a new life stage. I found whom I was searching for. And I'm not beeping anymore. Have you seen people who live in a committed relationship with their spouse, They said, yes, I do, but they still have their radars wide open. That's the dilemma. That's the question. That is the thing that you should never do, because it will create problems. It creates always problems. I needed to learn this, how to protect my boundaries. I needed to learn it as a pastor, and I needed to learn it as a therapist as well. As a pastor, you come down from the pulpit and you really had that good sermon because you felt that the Holy Spirit is taking control over you, and you found the right words in the right place for the right people. And you know that lady is coming towards you and says, "Oh, Pastor, this was such a powerful message. Thank you. What are you doing?" Who's in control? I'm so glad that the Lord spoke to you. I am the one who controls the distance between the two of us. Or another thing, it's a Bible study class on Wednesday evening, and it became quite late. And I'm a kind person. Of course, when the bus is gone, I am kind enough to take people home from the Bible study class. But there is that beautiful young lady who missed her bus and needs to be brought home. What to do now? I asked the old lady who lives just one corner away from the church to sit next to me. Then I asked the young lady to sit on the back seat. I take her home, although she lives far away from the church. And at last, I take home the old lady of 80 who lives just next to the church. And she's very wise. She never asks questions. She knows exactly what I'm doing and why I am doing this. And I do it even if I laid conflicts on myself because of this behavior. I teach at the theological college in Hungary, and there was a lady who lives just close to the place where we live and with my family, and asked me, "You know, I read on the schedule that you will teach us on next Sunday. Can I come with you? Because the train is driving in a different direction and it takes 2 hours longer by train." Of course, I'm a kind person, and I say, "Yes, of course you can come with me, but only if somebody else comes too, not just the two of us." Do you know how she responded? "Are you saying that I'm a prostitute?" No, I didn't say this. But I don't want you to bring in that situation where others could question your integrity, and mine too. Imagine we drive in to the parking place of the college, and you go out of my car, I go out of my car, and some of my colleagues stand there and talk with each other in front of the building and see us stepping out of the car. What will be their first thought? I don't want to put you into that situation, and myself neither. So we will not drive together in my car, just the two of us. Forget it. Only if somebody else comes too. We needed to learn to deal with these questions. But then I became a therapist as well, and when you start a new profession, you feel a bit insecure first, and it is so much easier to work together with somebody. Of course, it looks very strange. 2 men work together with a couple, so there are 3 men and 1 woman in the room. That's not okay. Of course, you work together with a lady, with a therapist lady working together with a couple. And imagine now, we stay there in the office when the couple goes home to evaluate what happened there. We start speaking about the sexual life of somebody else. It is just so quick that the air gets overheated. What do you do to prevent infidelity from happening? I made some very clear rules. I work together only with ladies whom I introduced first to my wife. I wanted the two women to look in each other's eyes, to shake hands with each other. And I insisted to get introduced to her husband. I wanted to meet him. I wanted him to know who I am. And every time we met, I involved the persons who are not present to be there as witnesses of everything that will happen here by saying, oh, imagine we were with Dora in a new restaurant on the weekend. You should try it with your husband too. It's just great. You see what I did? I involved these people to be witnesses of everything that will happen here because I want to have clear boundaries. And the same happens if a lady comes alone when the husband is not ready to get involved into therapy. I ask these ladies only to come if somebody else is in the building too. I stay never together, just two of us in the building, because I want it to be transparent. I want it to be safe. So what do you do to protect your boundaries? There are exceptionally dangerous fields, like ambiguous remarks. There are people who always tell jokes that you can understand in two ways. If you will, you can understand it in a sexual way, but they do it very smart. They do it in a way that they can say, oh, it was not my intention, you misunderstood me. But if somebody catches this side of the story, then they go on to the next step. Be very careful with that. Testing touches. Ladies, have you ever experienced men with whom you shake hands and they just forget their hands there and they start touching? Testing touches. They just test you if you are open for them to go on. Or dating sites. I need to admit something. Once I was asked to have a presentation about internet dating, and I registered myself to a dating site. I did it, yes. My wife sat next to me, so I told her to be there. I want her to see everything that I'm doing there. I wanted to see how it works and what kind of people are there, how they do it. And imagine what happened. I saw the profile of a church elder whom I know very closely, married for decades, having 3 children. Oh, what does he has to do there? Of course, I asked him. It was just a game, you know. A friend of mine registered me. I have nothing to do with it. I'm old enough not to believe every story. And it suddenly came out that he was actually involved in multiple of affairs beside his wife. And the car. Be careful with the car. As I mentioned, I was listening to more than 130 stories with real people who were involved in infidelity. And in nearly every story, the car of the man plays a role. I formulated for myself, you know what is the most erotic body part of a man? His car. Be careful with the car. So, step number 1 was define your relationship. Who are you to each other? Step number 2 was mark and protect the boundaries. Yes, step number 3 is put in 100%. Put in 100%. What does that mean? It means that you can only take out from that bank account as much as you have put in. I know people who put into their marriage 60% and they want to withdraw 100%. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. If you find a bank that operates like this, tell me, please. I will bring all my savings there. You will never find a bank that operates like this because it will get bankrupted. A marriage gets bankrupted as well if you put in only 60% and want to take out 100%. No, it doesn't work. You put in 100% and then you can take out 100%. This is part of my own research. I have developed a seminar, a training for couples, a marriage enrichment training, and I was measuring what are the results of this training. And I followed these couples for a period of half year, and I could identify a growth of 7% in marital satisfaction during this half-year period. But then I took a control group. Those couples who have never attended such a training, never read books about marriage, and I just measured their satisfaction with their relationship once and a half year later, just to see the natural process of a marriage. Imagine in every category that we have measured, the satisfaction dropped down up to 13% just in a period of 6 months. So just in 6 months, you can see a huge difference between those couples who are intentional with their relationship and those who are just average. You know, we don't learn how love works. It comes from the inside. It is a question of emotions, of instincts, you know. If you have to learn it, then it's already, it's not the right thing. You don't learn how to love. It just comes naturally. No, it doesn't come naturally. Imagine if there is a difference in just 6 months. What a difference you could measure in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years. There is a difference. And the difference is made by what you put into your marriage. What efforts you put into your marriage. What time you invest in your marriage. What amount of money you invest into your marriage. Your marriage should be the #1 investment of your life. We have a common language with my son. By the way, this was my first car that I ever owned. It's a Skoda 120. And as he started to go to school, to primary school, it was at first very interesting for him. He was very excited, very eager to learn. And then I recognized that his excitement drops down. I don't want to go to school, it's boring, and so on. And then I asked him a question. If you would be a car, what kind of car would you like to be? Imagine the answer of a 7-year-old. Of course, a Ferrari. What else? Okay, son. You would like to be a Ferrari. Good. Imagine a Ferrari driving on the motorway with 80 kilometers per hour. What would you say? Well, I would say that the man who is driving the car don't know how to drive. Or there is something wrong with the Ferrari. Yes, that's a very good answer. Okay, then imagine my first car, this old Skoda car. Imagine that car driving with 120 on the motorway. What would you say? Well, I would say the car brings out everything that is in the engine. Very good answer. So now I ask you again, what kind of car are you? A Ferrari? Okay, then you know what is expected from you. If you are a Ferrari, you need to fly like an airplane, just a bit deeper. Then it's not okay to drive with 70 or 80. Then you need to bring out everything what is in the engine. If not, then you are a Skoda. If a Skoda drives with 120, this kind of Skoda, not the new ones, then we say they brought out everything what is in the engine. You understand my point? What kind of car is your marriage? bring out the most of it. So we took these 3 steps, and let us summarize again, just to be sure that you have learned the lesson. Number 1, define your relationship. Who are you to each other, and what can you expect from each other? Then secondly, mark and protect the boundaries of your relationship. And number 3, put in 100%. Then you will get back 100%. How about if we end this presentation with a loyalty resolution that we could read together aloud? Are you in? Would you please stand up with me and read this statement, this resolution aloud? I am married, which means that I have narrowed except only the signals and responses of one person. I want to be a good spouse for that person, and that person only. I have intentionally chosen her and don't want to spend the rest of my life looking for closeness and intimacy in the company of others. I have no desire or intention to squander the gift of my sexuality on anyone else. I will resolutely protect our relationship against all intruders, taking special care to guard its boundaries in all circumstances. I will take responsibility for my words and actions. I will avoid ambiguous language that may get clear to all that I love my spouse and that I am not available for a relationship with anyone else. I intend to use every possible tool and all the sound advice that is available to improve our relationship and help our marriage achieve its fullest potential. To this end, I will consider every penny and every minute spent on improving our marriage to be a prime investment in the most important venture of my life. Amen. Amen. Do we have some time for questions and answers? That would be nice. Please take your seat.
Thank you, Dr. Gabor. And I'm sure there are those of you who have questions, so we've got some time. I believe supper will be at 5:30, so we've got some time. So, any questions for Dr. Gabor?
Yes, Pastor. Yesterday you explained the various stages of a married life, of a family life. And today you also mentioned in infidelity, it goes through a certain stage.
Yes.
Do you have a study or have you defined those stages and the various route that it takes?
Mm-hmm. I have only my own observations from my clients whom I work with, so this is not representative. But I made observations in 2 different ways. I observed in which life stages it happens more often that somebody gets involved in an affair with a third person. And I also observed the stages how an affair builds up. Let us take the first one. Among men, when a man becomes unfaithful, I recognized 2 life stages where it happens more often than anywhere else in life. This is when the first child is born. Something changes in the relationship, and even then, when the wife is so vulnerable, how can he do that? And it is partly because he doesn't feel like a man anymore in his own relationship. For a woman, becoming a mother gives so much feedback about being a woman that she barely doesn't need her husband anymore to feel herself like a woman. For a man, becoming a father doesn't give so much feedback from his masculinity to not be dependent on his wife anymore, to feel himself like a man. And this is a very sensitive part of life. Of course, he should know that this is only a short period and he will get his wife back. But he gets in panic. And he thinks that from now on, this will be normal and this will be for the rest of his life. I wish somebody would be there and whisper him in the ear, just wait, 1, 2, mostly 3 years, and you will get your wife back. Don't do anything wrong that you will regret later. But there is nobody to tell this. So this is why I ask you to tell these people that this is just a short period. The second period, when it happens very often, is when men get into the midlife crisis. Somewhere at the end of their 30s and the beginning of their 40s. I told you yesterday about this. Among ladies, there is also a period when it happens much more often than anywhere else in their life cycle. It is when the children fly out and they start working again outside the home. Then they feel challenged that they are capable for so many things, not only for cooking and changing the diapers, and they get lots of feedback from other men. Wow, what a nice dress. Oh, this is a new hairstyle. Wow. And they get confused by all these feedbacks, and it can happen in this life stage. Let us take the second part of the question. It starts, I like it how Gary Chapman describes it. It starts with a coffee at the working place. It's just a coffee. We sat just together and had a small talk and drinking coffee. Stop drinking coffee. Especially stop drinking coffee with somebody of the opposite sex. Because when at home, it's not everything as you would like to have it. It becomes so natural that somebody else gets your attention and that other person gets more and more attractive to you. It's just a coffee. It's so harmless, isn't it? But after a while, you catch yourself by longing for that coffee every day. And you start recognizing that it is not about the coffee. It's about the kind atmosphere. It's about the feedback that the other person gives you, where you feel yourself as a good person, where you feel yourself valued, which you maybe didn't have at home for the last few weeks or months or even years. The next stage is when you start fantasizing about that other person. First only daydreaming. Then you catch yourself by fantasizing and masturbating. And it becomes something that is so important to you that it is a parallel world. You already look forward when the coffee comes. And then you make the next step to organize a meeting outside the coffee context. It becomes more and more personal. And then suddenly, you wake up in the bed of somebody else, and you don't know how you get into this situation. And you just say, it can happen to any one of us. No. There were very clear steps before that. And you should take attention to these steps. But because you don't know that there is a pattern, you just think that it is something harmless. It's just a coffee. Stop drinking coffee. Especially with the representatives of the other sex.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, for the answer that you just gave, I was thinking a woman should have only a woman friend, because you cannot have a man as a friend because it's an opposite sex, and only a woman can understand another woman, and you can understand their feeling, what they're going through. But you cannot share it with the man because he's totally a different species, because he can talk to his friend and they can understand him. And that's what I feel. And men who go astray, it's like they don't have anything in the house, because when you have kids and children growing up, you have so many things to think of. You don't even have time to think of other women or other
Yes.
things to date. I mean, that's what is my perception. But my question is, does culture play an important role? Because what I have seen in
The first part,
the
please,
culture,
Mom.
the culture,
The culture.
the
okay.
culture. Because I come from an Indian culture where
Yes.
I've been brought up. I mean, we don't even think of infidelity and having affairs and things like that. I come from a big family from both the sides, like dads and moms. So we have cousins and cousin brothers and sisters where both the sides are totally from different side of family. One is very orthodox and the other one is very happy going from the Portugal side of background. So I have seen both, but what I have noticed is the family stability and the thing is towards my dad's side, because they are a praying family, and nobody